Welcome to Shorty's SuperCoach, and today we're going to have a look at the West Coast Eagles as part of Shorty's Shortlist, where we take a look at the SuperCoach picks for 2016. Not always the most obvious ones. I'm not going to be telling you about Matty Pritis because we all know how much of a gun he is. Some of the players that should be on your radar, a few players that offer a bit of value, could break out, and perhaps their average on paper is a little better than what it actually says when you take a closer look into it. Injury affected games, etc. So just delving into a few scores like that. But anyway, we're just going to start off with Elliot Yeo. He's a very interesting prospect, Yeo. I think he'll be on a lot of people's radar, but it's worth looking at because he's a very tough guy to get a read on. Looking at his stats, he does everything pretty well without excelling in anything. He's a great overhead mark, takes quite a few marks, 17 touches per game, 3.4 tackles, kicked the 18 goals from the 24 games, 5 marks, 1.3 of those contested, so he certainly can take it in the air, as I said, and 8 of those 17 touches are contested, so he can find it in the contest. They're all pretty handy numbers. It says that he's got the ability to do everything pretty well and he can work it, but does he excel in anything? That's the question. His SuperCoach numbers, 58 and 61.9 his first 2 seasons, comes across to West Coast in 2014, 65.5, and last year was the obvious breakout, 82.1, and he had some big games. Round 5, 25 touches, 9 marks, 5 tackles, 119 SuperCoach points versus the Giants. A couple of weeks later against the Suns, 29 touches, 9 marks, 6 tackles, kicked the 4 majors, 146 SuperCoach points. Against the Crows in round 15, 26, 3 goals, 129 SuperCoach points. And his impact was felt in a big final against the Hawks. Had the 19 touches, 6 marks, kicked a clutch goal early in the game, 104 SuperCoach points. So there's some of his good numbers, but he did play in a variety of positions throughout the year due to West Coast's heavy injury toll. He was down back at times, he was floating through that midfield as well. Had 8 scores between 40 and 65, which is very disappointing. He also had a grand final to forget. Those 8 scores in the season proper too, not even including that grand final score where I think he only had the 5 touches. So he's a midfield defender. That's his appeal. The other appeal is that he's 443k. He's very much affordable and he's a player on the rise. A lot of people believe that he can be an absolute gun if he gets midfield time. I think they could be correct there, but the question is, will he get that midfield time and will he excel this year? I'm pretty confident that Yeo will be a good player down the track because he has all the traits to be, but I feel possibly in 2016 we still may receive some up and down scores. Now we might really look into his NAB challenge as it comes around, but at this point I'll be holding off. He's not that much of a bargain to what I feel we're going to get, and we don't know the exact scores he's going to produce because he's got that little bit of unknown factor because he hasn't really had a consistent sample size in the one position and certainly not throughout the course of a year. So he's definitely one to watch. I've seen him floating around on a few sides, so keep an eye on him, no doubt, but tread with caution at this point in time. Jerry McGovern, same goes with him. Tread with a bit of caution. But the appeal is also there. I mean, Mitch Brown and McKenzie come back. That means McGovern won't be doing that lockdown defender role that he has. But what position will he play? I've heard some people say he might go back forward, which he played quite well in the early part of his career. Will he play that intercepting role? That's the role we're going to be looking at here as far as SuperCoach is concerned. If he's floating around as that third tall and finding his way across the packs to intercept, because that's his absolute key. One of his best traits is to read the play, drop back and then rebound as a rebounding defender, and he does it very well. Reads the play and marks in the air. That's probably his best asset as a player. Rounds 1 to 10 last year, he missed round 7, but aside from that, rounds 1 to 10 averaged 93, so that's impressive with a low score of 76. That's not bad as a defender, and a high score of 145. Just dominated that opening game. He's 24 years old. The query on him is, of course, where is he going to play, and is he going to have too much defensive mindset for a SuperCoach liking? He's not a big ball winner. We need him to produce impact, and that's getting high points by getting the ball off the opposition and using it well. I mean, he started, as I said, averaging 93. Then from there on out, it was 64.5. So he really struggled, and that's why he returns that sort of 80 kind of average, and you'll find him at a similar price to Yeo. His body was a query, as we know, last year. He struggled with hamstring injuries. He struggled with the shoulder injury towards the end of the year. And it really caused Adam Simpson quite a lot of headaches. So that's the question mark on him. He's reasonably priced. I think if we can find him intercepting across that half back line, you may consider him. But personally, I think I'll be steering clear because the uncertainty of his position and scoring ability over a serious course of time, like Yo, you got to put a question mark on, and his body. So I'll probably be steering clear, but he's worth a look. Shannon Hearn, the skipper, formerly a pretty handy scorer for SuperCoach. Since 2009, where he really broke out, averaging 93.4, his averages have snuck between 75.7, which was last year, and that 93.4. So he's very consistent. 4 averages in the 80, as well as a 91.4 in 2012, I think it was. So he is very consistent historically. Last year he really dropped off probably towards 8 or 9 points per game, which was interestingly, and looking through his numbers, you can't really identify any real means that he did that for. I think he doesn't win a great deal of his own ball, which is a bit of a problem, and he probably played slightly deeper and more accountable with, as I've mentioned already, the defensive troubles that West Coast were having. Now in that 2009 season, it's always good to dissect a player's career best year. When they drop off a bit, you look at their best season and what they were doing to produce those numbers, because he dropped off 18 points in comparison to, I know it's a while ago, 2009, but that's his previous best. In 2009 he averaged the 20 touches, 12.8 kicks, 7.2 handballs, 4.8 marks, and since then he really hasn't picked it up quite to that level. He came close at times, and it's interesting to look at. His kicks haven't dropped off. I mean, he's a great ball user, and they want it in his hands, and that hasn't really dropped off. He's been getting the same amount of kicks and using it at a pretty much the same sort of efficiency. It's been those handballs. Since that 7.2 handballs he had in 2009, the best he's come back with his last 2 seasons, which is about 4.5. That's only a little bit of a drop off, but it can really help out just to get more involved in the play, a few handball receives and some easy points, because it's easier to hit a handball, and he's obviously playing slightly deeper, that leads me to think, and just not getting involved in the play as much. He's certainly a designated kicker, but just not getting as much easy ball from that back line. So would I consider him? Yeah, possibly. I mean, he's cheap, that's for sure. I think you can definitely bank on him. If you want a guy who's going to average about 85, I reckon you can lock him in. But for me, he's going to have to show quite a bit through NAB Challenge. He's nicely priced, but you really want 90 plus, I feel, from a defender. That's the goal, and I just don't really see that happening. He may, certainly keep him on your radar, but at this point in time, he's going to have to do quite a bit to convince me, that's for sure. We'll move on to another defender, and this time we've talked about how much injury they were caused last year. Mitch Brown was, of course, missing bulk of last year. I think he played the 1 game and got injured early, scored the 5 points, and that prices him at 133k. And look, it's very appealing because you would expect him to play all, if not most, the games. So expect him to find plenty of the game time for the Eagles. And is he going to score you big points? I wouldn't have thought so. That's my one question mark on him. He's only 27 years old, so he's still got the ability to be, right near his best sort of footy. He's played real key post, which has seen him rarely average 10 touches per game, or per year I should say. So yeah, as I said, he's not a big scorer. You can sort of draw a comparison to Nathan Brown last year, another Brown, but a guy that was priced around that 130, 140 mark. We know he's not going to score big points, but we do know he's going to play games. So how the defensive rookies roll out will probably decide whether Mitch Brown is in most teams. We know the Essendon Mitch Brown's going to be there. Will we get the secondary one? He'll be a chance because I think he's reliable. Yes, his body's let him down at times, but for a guy, if he has a good pre-season and he's playing well through the NAB Challenge, I think you'd lock him in if we don't get a great deal of other options in the back line. Because as I say, when picking the rookies, yes, we can look at their potential scoring ability, but there's nothing better than assured games. So Mitch Brown should offer that, I think. Bit of a smoky, this next one. Mark Hutchings. He's probably a guy that I say his name and you go, surely not Shorty. But you can get him as a midfield forward, and I'll just read out a few of his numbers that make me sort of prick my ears up a little bit about him. In his first season, 2013, averaged 89.9 from the 9 games. That's a pretty good first up year. Yes, he's a mature age rookie. He'll be 25 next year when the season starts. Loves contested ball, loves tackles. That's what he lives off. Last year, his average, when you look at it quite basically, wasn't that impressive. But when you really delve into it, it's not that bad. Now, he had round 7, round 15, round 16, all sub-affected games. Now, round 16, he came on in the third quarter as a sub, had the 7 touches, 2 tackles, 40 SuperCoach points, really finds his way, and from there on out he played the full game of every other game leading to the grand final. Now of course no one had a good grand final for the Eagles, so taking out that game, the 9 games leading up to that, including the qualifying final and the prelim, he averaged 92.7. 20 touches, 5.4 tackles. That's impressive stuff. Now, you might be thinking that's probably not enough, and I probably agree with you, but as a forward, that's what we can select him as, and you might be able to bump that average up to around 95. What are the queries on him? He's never really cemented himself as a player yet, whether that be through injury or through actually getting in the team. He's a mature age player, obviously recruited, a lot later than most draftees, which was interesting because he seems to be quite a natural footballer. He has tagged in the past, so that's concerning, especially because Scott Selwood has gone. Played a bit of waffle footy and worked into his game last year, but I think he's just one, especially for draft. It'd take a gutsy man to pick him in Classic, that's for sure, because we've got a couple of decent mid-price options as it is, and even lower with Conquer and Menzel, as I've mentioned. So you'd take a pretty gutsy guy to pick him, but I think maybe in the draft he's a player that not many people would know. I think his average sits around that 75, 76 mark, so it's fairly cheap. And look, if he can produce back up to that 95, if he's flying in the NAB challenge, because he can find mid 20 touches and he gets plenty of tackles, which is just gold for SuperCoach, you might think about him. But bit of a smoky, and I'll certainly be keeping him on my watch list for draft, that's for sure. And I'll just finish off with Jack Darling. Again, this is probably more of a draft one. He's got plenty of talent, plenty of potential. 83.8 average last year was his highest, surprisingly, even though he battled foot problems and a stress reaction in the foot and leg, I believe. His average is leading up to between the 70 and 80 mark, just sort of mediocre numbers, but what really lights up for me is he's a big tackler. He's a key forward who is sort of a mid height player. He's not a real tall player, which a lot of forwards are these days, so he can be somewhat mobile, and Kennedy's more often than not going to get the best defender. Now he tackles, he loves a good tackle, and I just think if he can find more of the ball, we could see his average floating around the 90s. Now yes, he's a bit up and down, too up and down for my liking to pick him with any confidence in Classic, that's for sure, but he loves to tackle, can kick a big goal, can find the ball in the air. It's just a matter of whether he can, perhaps his endurance needs to improve, I'm not sure. He obviously struggled with injury, but if he can just get up the ground a bit more and find perhaps a more SuperCoach user role, a bit more friendly to the scoring system, then he may be a guy that you just have in your back pocket for SuperCoach draft and might pick him in those later rounds. But anyway, that's a bit of a wrap for the Eagles. A few players, more so your mid-price range, that could really explode, because I think there's a lot of players that are already going well, a la Gaff and Pritis, of course, and Shuey's a guy that I think offers a slight bit of value, but probably not enough. So that's a wrap for the Eagles. If I missed anybody, certainly let me know. There's quite a few not controversial players in there, but really up for debate. They could average in the 95, so they could just be those guys that bust and average around 70 to 80, which is not what we want. So probably not many of those guys will fit in your side, but there could be a hidden gem in there, and you always got to look out for those. So just definitely covering off on a few of them. Give the channel a bit of subscribe as well, give the video a like, certainly comment if you got any thoughts on it at all, and I'll be back with the dogs in the next couple of days, and then SuperCoach really gets rolling, where I'll have a look at my team, my first initial team once it gets released, and then yeah, we'll really get the SuperCoach content rolling as pre-season really starts to amp up. So I'll talk to you guys soon.